so much for being here. I am surrounded by some serious women in tech. So hopefully we'll have a very engaging discussion. But I want to start out with something light. For anyone who knows me, I am a bit of a movie fan. So just a little icebreaker. I would like to know, what is your favorite movie or TV show? If you don't have a favorite one, you can just tell me the last one you watched.
Funny that you told us about this already, and I can't think of any. But I recently watched, I think it's Murders in the Building or something.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I just discovered Korean movies. I'm a new fan. I can't remember the title, but it was really excellent. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, those are a rabbit hole.
The latest one I've watched, I'm not sure I have favorite movies, but I like, yes, I do actually. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Ooh,
That's
I love
my
that.
favorite show.
Excellent.
But my most recent, which is actually out of my line, I don't like horror for nothing. The world is hard enough. But I started watching Stranger Things. So see how that goes.
That is a whole discussion by itself. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So our main topic for today, obviously, is what's next? Once you get funding, the journey to funding. So I'd like to ask you, start off with, what has your experience been like in a tech space? What brought you to it? What problem were you trying to solve so avidly that you decided to enter this game to begin with?
Okay, for myself, I started my first job at the age of 20. I was living in Johannesburg, South Africa, and when I came back to Nigeria, I had to move back to my parents' house. I was broke, and I was getting paid good money when I lived in Joburg, so I just told myself I never wanted this to happen again. I had to teach myself. Then it was on Naira Land, and they would talk about this stock or that mutual fund. It was just like really crazy. The information was everywhere. So once I figured it out, I wanted to create a cheat code for somebody else just like me in those very same shoes. And then it started on Instagram, 1-minute videos. And I realized that we were not able to, curate it in such a way that it was a great learning experience. Then we just had to bring in tech, and here we are.
Awesome. I've seen a lot of those videos, especially from the early days. They were lovely. So, Tomilola, could you tell us a bit about yours?
So your question was, how did I get into the tech space? I truly didn't get into the tech space. I think I got into the financial inclusion space and tech pulled me. I started out my career in Meristem, investment management, spent about 4 years, went for my master's. But I would say I've truly got into the fintech or tech space sometime while in B school. I had to do some projects for both in Sydney with a peer-to-peer lending company. And then being the only African student, I was attached to this VC firm that wanted to invest in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa in fintech. But they had no idea what side of fintech. So being a Nigerian, they said, hey, go do the research. And I did it just to do it. And my plan was to either not come back to Nigeria, or if I came back to Nigeria, I was going back to my investment management firm. But hey, here I am, so I guess.
Life evolves. Thank you.
Okay. I studied information technology, so for my undergrad, and was a software developer for a bit. So I've been in the tech space since. So I think the question might be, how did I even get into the startup space? It was, in the early days of Konga, Deal Day, Paga. I just sort of became interested in who are these guys that are trying to come up with an idea and get everybody to use their solution. What does this mean? And I just got interested in it. So I left the software development space. Now that's where the money is, so maybe I should go back. But I left that space and then did more innovation management, which has led me to what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So now, a lot of people see the tech space, it's like every week there's a new valuation. People are getting funded. Millions of dollars seem to be thrown everywhere. But what's the reality behind that? the journey you've had from maybe convincing friends and family to give you a little bit to convincing angel investors to VCs. What has that journey been like? Yeah? Tomi?
I'll talk about it's an ongoing journey. I like the fact that you said it's a journey, and like you hear from different funding rounds, like the pre-A, pre-seed, ABC. It's a journey. At the beginning of the journey was convincing people who were not who at the earliest stage. And I said the journey wasn't. I never saw funding as going for the money, and I have to say that a lot of startups within the, I've been in incubators, I've been in accelerators, and participating sometimes in those programs are all for the money. I was never in it for the money because I just had this feeling like if I keep doing what I was doing, the money will come. Not correctly. But the first step for me was once we started doing what we're doing, I was using my savings initially. So in the first few months of, let me say first 6 to 8 months, I was bootstrapping. Then immediately we saw the growth, how we wanted to grow. We knew, okay, fine, how much do I need? And looking at it, I knew that my savings or my nest egg was not going to help any longer. So I approached people that actually have met me through the journey. It wasn't even a function of meeting uncles or family. It was people at the early stage of the journey that I could approach and say, this is what I'm doing, and I would like to. But I would say what helped at that early stage was my conviction. It wasn't that I knew everything. I didn't have all the answers, but they could identify that there's this passion in her and she will do whatever it takes to realize this vision. And I remember being in front of an investor at that time, and he said, I mean, when you know that your conviction can win someone over, because writing a check or getting people to take money out of their pocket for you is not a big deal. But when you're in front of someone and they're like, can I double my check? Then you know that you have been able to convince. And I actually was very panicked at that time. I was like, no, are you sure you know what you're doing? I can lose your money. And he said, I don't think you've had it all figured out, but I'm willing to take that risk that you would find a way. So at the first stage of that is your conviction. It's not your, it's you. Who are you? When the going gets tough, do you have the staying power? Because the truth about companies or startup or building from scratch is staying power. So when those chips are down, would you do whatever it takes to go through that hole? And that's what they're looking out for, your conviction and your passion at the first stage. So that was my pre-seed, which I raised about 300K at that time. The next stage was our seed. At the seed stage, it's still an art. I think that funding is an art and a science. At that seed stage, it's still very much an art. But this time around, you've moved from passion to showing that, you know what, this is the way I'm going. But you need to have a very clear understanding of the markets, like clear understanding of the direction the market is going and how you're going to position for it. So here you're showing the future of the industry and what you know differently that the next person doesn't. And so you're convincing also now, not beyond just what you're saying, to showing how you have built an MVP, how you have convinced the first users and you're showing them that I've convinced 1,000 people, I can get 100,000 users. So that's the next stage of it, your understanding of the market, how you have designed the product, and you're showing them how you will get revenue. Or in this stage of seed, it's no longer pre-revenue. Oftentimes, it's like you already have those revenue. The next stage, which is either a pre-series A, post-bridge, whatever, or Series A, it's a class science, oftentimes, in a real scenario. Of course, there are outliers. It's a very clear science. What's your growth rate? What's your MRR, your monthly recurring revenue? What's your annual recurring revenue? What's your monthly growth rate? Are you a beta positive? So some of these metrics is what you're tracking. So if you want to raise fund at Series A, it's not you telling story. You want to save yourself the time, get those metrics, understand how you're growing, and then you save yourself 1 year of trying to raise a Series A when you could do it in 3 months.
Fabulous. I love that. That was an excellent breakdown of your experience. Yep, deserves a round of applause. So Tosin, please share so in your particular case, first of all, may I just say, Money Africa Kids, Lada.ng, are you trying to build a conglomerate? What's happening?
But you can see there's a marriage. Sorry. But you can see there's a marriage, like they all connect to each other. So Money Africa is like the very first one, where, just basically educating people about money, leveraging on technology to be able to get a subscription where people actually subscribe to. Every time they come and we educate them, they're like, what next? What should we do? So we created Lada. Lada is a one-stop investment platform, right? We got into an accelerator in Beyond Deck with a $125,000 check. And then when we started, we wanted to be a one-stop investment platform, but we're actually pivoting now because we are realizing that from our existing users, their pain points, and just being able to personalize it towards them. So in terms of getting funded, it's us getting into an accelerator, telling them about the dream, what the future is. Sometimes it also helps that, they've seen what you've done in the past, what you've been able to achieve, and they're able to sort of bet on you and be able to see, what's the story going forward. So yeah.
Exactly. It's very important to be able to tell your story, be able to share that story effectively. Of course, show some traction, be able to just call on your actual metrics, not just vanity metrics, the real things that show that your business is actually growing. And so, Damilola, from your own side, I know you have experience from both sides of the table. So what can you tell us about funding and like the journey most people go through when they're approaching you at the Co-Creation Hub?
To be honest, it's everything that Tomi said. There's actually, she broke it down very well, not much to add. At every stage, there's the arts and science, there's science or pure economics at some point. And when, we support companies in our programs, especially, female-led organizations, it's the same thing, right? At that, in fact, when I run, certain pitch trainings, I'm always saying that don't sell the market and not sell yourself. Because there are times where you sell the market, you sell that this is a good solution, but then you don't sell yourself. So what you've done is that you've either just shared a lot of information about a certain sector, and the investor would just be interested in it, but find someone else, because ideas are everywhere. But we just keep listening until he finds a perfect founder that can actually execute, because you couldn't, that conviction wasn't there that you are the person for this sector, for this market, or to implement this solution. So that early stage, it's very important that you're able to sell yourself and the team. You're saying, I'm the best person to figure out this. It might not be this, but I'll figure out something, and I'm the best person. Don't give your money to anyone else. But as you grow, it then becomes, okay, show us the traction. What have you been doing? What is the revenue, whether it's gross, net, all of those things now become important as well. And then we also find, especially when we work with women, that there's also that knowledge as to the different fundraising, strategies that you can use. But even that there are options as well. Some people are not very exposed to the different options that exist within the space as well. So, there's also that learning. So I feel like the fundraising journey, you learn a lot. You probably get shut down a lot. So you learn about yourself in the process. Half of our work sometimes with accelerators and incubators is therapy. You always find founders that come to you and they're like, it's not even about the company or what they're facing. It's just, maybe the amount of rejections that you get, and how you are able to rise above that as well. So,
That's an amazing point. Do you have something to follow up on that?
You mentioned the rejections, and I just smiled. But I wanted to add something I learned about a year ago. A friend of mine in the US said she gamified it while raising funds, and she's raised up to like $10 million. And I said, "What do you mean you gamified it?" He said, "When she's pitching or she's jumping on calls every day, she's like, oh, how many no's today?" She was like, so it's almost like, oh, I'm gonna get maybe six no's. So it's like, oh, first one, second. So because you need to find something to deal with the mental. People don't understand how even those you've seen that raise the most money are like, how do they do it? You hear, oh, I spoke to 500 investors. I've heard of those. I spoke to 150. I'm like, even when I raise my salary, I'm like, wow, I don't think I want to do that. But that's how much they kept going. So, but you need that, again, staying power to not get bogged down by the no. And it's difficult. During my seed round, I remember having a friend who was more like the advisor during the process. And when I had a bad call, she'd jump on the call with me after, and she's like, I'm like, oh, I don't feel like this person, remember this person that raised, this people said no to them. She kind of like brainwashes me to pick myself up so that by the time I'm ready for the next call, because your energy is very important on those calls. What are you said around selling yourself? You can't jump on an investor call, you have your numbers, everything, and you're talking like someone that is not happy about what you're selling. If someone comes to sell you how to make money and a happy pill, and they are looking like they are sad, would you buy? So some people will be talking, their voice is like this, no excitement, no energy. No, sometimes you can't have it every day. So sometimes you have to brainwash yourself, take a breather after the no, jump in as if the no didn't matter. So when she said she gamified it, it makes like she turns the no into a fun kind of thing. And I thought, okay, I'll try that. I'll let you guys know how that went.
I love it. That is awesome. And I love the points that you have both mentioned. So Damilola, about the learning process that you go through. You, of course, about how to deal with potential rejection. So most of my professional work is around leadership training and team performance. So I'm always curious as to the skills people focus on. Thinking about when you started out versus now, what skills have you picked up as a leader? How you deal with your team, how you deal with people? What would you say that has been probably one of the most valuable skills that you've picked up over the years?
I think for me, it has to be empathy. Yeah. So just at the end of the day, people want to see the human behind. They want to see you like in your real element. I mean, you can present yourself as a different person to the gram or to whoever, but these are people you spend a lot of your time with. So it's just basically, I think for me, it's empathy, yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So I'll go because it's the same thing, empathy. And I'll tell you why. So earlier on, I ran like a startup called Style Junkie very many years ago with my friends, so it was a bit light. And then I got into CC Hub, and initially it was about supporting startups. So, you come up with sessions, come up with metrics, chasing on reports, the whole works, right? And then I got the opportunity to go my way as CEO, and I ran that for 2 years. And sis, bro, I was like, what? And the first thing I learned from that is that I brought back when I rejoined CC Hub and continue supporting startups is empathy is the biggest thing. Like, as a founder, I remember then, like, I would sleep and wake up tired. You're consistently thinking about your business, whether you want to or not. It was such a, interesting learning and tiring time. But when I came out from that, I was like, you can't even support entrepreneurs without having empathy. It's useful for team as well. So I even feel like, it helps with when I'm working with my team. but it's so important, for entrepreneurs and working with entrepreneurs because you really don't know you don't know a business more than someone that sleeps, eats, and dreams about their business, whether they like it or not.
This brings up an excellent point about your support system. So, what kind of support system, mentors, friends, what kind of support system have you had over the years that have helped you in your business? I mean, you've brought up points like resilience, empathy. What helps you sustain that? Who are the people that help you sustain that?
From mine, it's definitely family. I come from a very strong knit family, so that's like huge, huge deal for me. They've been there over the years and all of that. A few years ago, I went on a travel. Like my friend was going on a trip and then was with other girls, and it was just like we're just going for travel. Now this travel trip has ended up being such a really, really amazing rock. And also, there are lots of nice founders, network out there. But yeah, but personally for me, definitely family is like number one.
Very important.
I'm going to answer your leadership question because that's my biggest, I think she said empathy, similar. I think mine has been self-awareness, a deeper knowledge of myself because I've just learned that if I know myself deeper, I know my strengths, I know my weakness, and I can easily start edging against my weaknesses and then also finding those that can complement me. One of the first things I learned was my leadership style or my leadership archetype. There were 4 that I knew about. I said there was the king and queen, there was the warrior, there was the lover, there was the joker. Very early, I realized that I was a lover by default. But if you cross the line, and it's so easy for you to cross the line with a lover-style leader, which means, oh yeah, we're all friends, we're all chill. And then I move straight to warrior. So that's the first. Second thing is also understanding where I needed help. So from leadership coaching, which has been phenomenal, and also now going to the support was my advisory board. And that advisory board is picking people who I'm not being extra, people who were way ahead of me, but I'm not being extra formal with. Because the real way to give value from a mentorship, it came from people I could call, and it looks as if I'm ranting or I'm stressed and I'm communicating. And in it, they're telling me what to do. Because sometimes I'm looking at the problem in a certain direction. So if I was going in a very strict, formal way to these advisors, I would just tell them, this is the problem, what do I do? But maybe that's not even the problem. So I'll say the best thing that has happened to me and what I'm looking forward to being for others is that advisor where there's no power dynamic, where it's well broken down in a way that we're chatting, we're gisting, and in it is where I can influence you because that's what I've gotten the most from my leadership, from external support.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we'll have questions shortly. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand. So let's get back to the tech space as it is. A lot of you are in fintech, and I know we've had a lot of interesting developments of late. Dollar cards are not helping our lives. So a lot of this has to do with just the nature of startup life, which is dealing with uncertainty. And so what do you do when you have those moments, when the whole market changes overnight, when you suddenly have to deal with a scenario you probably weren't entirely prepared for? What do you do in those situations?
I mean, from my own experience, it's more about pause, wait, you understand? Like, I remember I was telling our community members, like over the past 10 days, the Naira against the dollar has been gaining like 10 Naira every day. So what do you do? And you can see people like really panicking and just trying to make, sometimes really just pause and wait. Somehow, we would sort of find and navigate its way. So for instance, if you look at the other time, they sort of banned cryptocurrencies, they found a way around it using the P2P. So really, you're not the regulator. It's not in your hands. Whatever you can control, go ahead and do it. If you can't control it, just pause.
Good advice. So from your perspective as someone who invests in startups, that supports startups, how do the founders under your umbrella typically deal with the scenario? How do you encourage them to deal with these scenarios?
So, I mean, there's the pause. There's also, because we worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over time, sometimes you can advise that you put things in place against something. Um, Whether it's, for example, simple things like policies, or you have simple relationships, or we form those relationships so that when it's needed, we can bring those relationships on board and say, this is something that has happened and is affecting the startup, how do we navigate that? Or what can you guys do? Did you think about, these kinds of startups before you came up with that? So on our end, we build those relationships. On our own end, we use experiences to say, this is something you should be mindful of, especially if you're in this sector. Even from the point where maybe we're interviewing or, even before, say, you get into a particular program, these are things that, we'll check for anyway. So I guess those are, the two key ways that we deal with that.
I think Damilola's point is very key around putting policies. I strongly believe that how do you eat an elephant? Like piece by piece or a bite at a time. So it's either external issues that you have no control about and you can just find ways to be resilient as a company, or it's internal issues that, that you can do something about. But one of the things I focus on a lot is fixing issues fundamentally, which means that there's an issue here. How do we ensure that it's never repeated? And it's a skill or stuff that we don't always see, because I've seen a lot with with team members, with senior people who say, oh, there's this issue, we solved it. But how do you go asking multiple whys, the 5 whys, to say, why did this happen? Why? Why? Until you find the root cause of it and fix it from the root cause. And so that's one of the most important things that I think anyone who wants to build an institution needs to do or needs to consider.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Systems and processes, controls, so mistakes don't come up, the same mistakes don't come up over and over again. Thank you for that. So are there any questions before I start asking the rounding questions? Does the audience have any questions? All right. So,
and
go ahead.
just to add, because some people might be thinking, we're in Nigeria. What if it's something that you've never experienced before? Then you go into the meeting room and brainstorm the way out. After probably you take a pause, you have a meeting, you have smart people on your team, and you start thinking of what's the way out of this. And they say where 2 or 3 are gathered.
Very true, very true. So now I'm going to ask you a very broad question about the tech space at large. What's next? What should we be looking forward to in the tech space? There's so much happening these days, honestly, Web3, crypto. In the landscape, you could bring it to Nigeria or the world as a whole. What should we be looking forward to in the tech space?
Tech space is so broad. So if I'm going to answer that without speaking with you, maybe is it fintech, is it this? I think I'll break it down into talent, funding, and maybe systems, policies, or whatever enabling environment. I'm thinking from a fintech perspective, so I'm trying to step away because I would say regulation. But first is we're going to keep seeing growth in the tech space. Forget it. We're going to keep seeing growth. And that's why we're even seeing a very huge pressure on talent because the growth is phenomenal. Even wherever session or anything, we're going to keep seeing growth, especially from the Nigerian and the African context. So anyone in the tech space, first biggest thing they need to start considering is how to build that pipeline of talent, because you're going to have shortage of talent, and you need to, and you then be competing aggressively with well-funded companies. So that takes me to the next question of funding. Funding, with everything, a lot of people say, oh, there's a recession. There was the fear-mongering that was going on earlier this year. I wasn't worried about it. Now, that sounds interesting because, I mean, I need money right now. Like, seed round is, I've exhausted it. I don't even know. I forgot that I raised seed round. You're going to, yes, so there's the old fear-mongering that is going on with funding. So new people coming into the tech space, people existing are like, what are we going to do? But I think that, I dare say that there's always a bubble time. There's always the time where people are getting significantly more multiples than, so there are times, so I don't think that funding would dry up. Funding would exist, but maybe at a more, so I think that more realistic valuations or more, significantly more metrics and due diligence. So what that means is that you can't wing this any longer in tech. You need to the early people that went ahead are the ones, maybe even the VC space, even the institutions are trying to figure out what this is, how do we measure this. Now they've gotten also smarter, so you can't wing it and you can't get away with what certain people have gotten away with. So come into the space with a very clear expectation and realistic expectation of what's expected of you. So that means that you have to dot your I's, you have to cross your T's. There's a way that some people have been able to run and then started getting the licenses as they go. There's a way that you would not be able to do that again. Most recently, one of a very big company, not particularly within the tech space, but entering into tech space, had a major fraud that hit the financial space. And now, it's just making regulators and everybody tighten and make things even harder for people that are new, or people that are like coming up. So you're just going to find a little bit things more harder. So which takes you to the third thing, is that you definitely need the talent in your space. And then you are needing a lot more expertise. You're needing a lot more expertise. It's easy for a lot of us to say, hey, I'm coming into tech, but you have no experience there. If you don't get it, if you can't get it based on maybe your board, your advisors, get it based on hiring the right talent and having this. So it's going to grow, but it's going to start sieving the boys from the men, and then people that would make it will be thoroughbreds. So,
Fabulous.
Tomi has said a lot about growth. I was going to talk about how I don't think we've scratched the surface yet. Every other time, people are complaining that, oh my gosh, there's so many fintechs. Like, no, it's not even enough. So we're going to see more entrants. Also, we want to see more exits, right? People actually listing, doing proper IPOs, amongst others. People say the market is relatively young. It might not happen like in the next 1 or 2 years, but hey, you never can tell. So at least we're looking at another 5 years horizon. I'd like to see more of that. Also, I think one of the biggest ways in which people exit in the Nigerian market is also via mergers and acquisitions. So again, probably more of that as well. So in terms of that, and of course, you can't talk about growth without talking about talent, like they are, interchangeable, as Tomi said. So yeah.
Dami, any last words on?
Yeah, years ago, people used to put tweets up and all. When are we going to see a unicorn? When is something going to happen? It's never going to be. Now we have unicorns. So let's just relax for a minute in that. And then think about what's next. Talents, I know that they've said it. I'm just adding to it because the shortage is enormous, guys. It's just like the Naira and dollar, what's happening. It's scary because we are not pushing out a lot from our universities. The quality is not there. We are growing in the ecosystem, and people are jackpying. So it's just, there's a lot of competition. And I feel that I was in a conversation recently where we were even talking about, so there's non-tech talent issue, there's also core tech talent. And, the founders were complaining that it's as if what we've been training at like the lights tech, and then they have issues with finding the back end, people that can actually create whatever magic it is they want to create at the back end. So I feel talent is a big thing. Scrutiny is also going to be more. I watched a Nollywood movie, and the bachelor in the movie was a tech founder who had raised money instead of an oil and gas tycoon. So once you start seeing that, once things start entering entertainment, it's culture, and people are very aware. And when people become aware of things like she was saying, you're going to get more scrutiny because people are now knowledgeable about the sector, the amount of money that can be made in that sector, and, everyone would want value from it. So there will be a lot of scrutiny as well, which is good for the ecosystem. It's just that people need to know that, yes, startup is fast and tech is fast, but very early on, start putting things in place so that in the future you don't get caught up. But thinking about the future, I think one thing is, on an Africa, like Africa-wide, we need to find ways to be more connected. I feel like that's the only way we can produce things. Like Africa needs to start producing stuff from the technology aspect. If not, we're not going to own certain things, and that's sort of scary. It's like a different kind of colonization, if I may. Because who's going to own the data, the tech, everything you will just be consuming. So we have to get to a point where we are actually producing things from hardware perspective, even software. We're having conversations with Google, and we're talking about, how do Africans play a role in all of these exciting things that you're doing? It's as if we're just consuming it. So we need to start, having those kinds of conversations. But I don't think one country will do it. I think there are pockets of greatness in different places, and we have to be connected. Even from making it easy for founders to expand from one region to another, it shouldn't be as difficult as it is right now. It is difficult, and it doesn't make sense, because we're in one continent. So that's what I see. It's about being producers of tech or playing in that space, and also that conversation about connectedness and expansion in addition to what they've mentioned.
I love that. So just before I get the final word, let me just say that I've loved all the points you've discussed, from the funding journey, your experiences as leaders, basically how you've evolved over the years as you've had to grow your business and fund. And so I would just like to get the last piece of advice that you would give to someone who's trying to raise funding for the first time in this environment. Just quick one line, what would you say, what would you advise them?
Use what is in your hands, use what you currently have to get what you want.
Fabulous.
I mean, for women specifically, don't be afraid. I like what she said about gamifying it. Everyone is receiving a no, and probably women receive more no's as well. But just do it afraid. If it's $1 million that you need, ask for it with your chest. Just back it up with the numbers, back it up with the conviction that you have, and if that's where you are in your business as well. I find that sometimes a lot of women hold back for too long when they could probably be scaling, their businesses. Sometimes you find that. So just, go ahead and do what you need to do.
Yeah, I'll say, writing on what Tosi and Dami said, a lot of people might want to go it alone. Don't be afraid to go it alone. But most especially, don't be afraid to ask for help. Get professional help. That's not your core. Fundraising might not be the core of your strength. So why not get those who are great at it, and so you can focus on what you need to do. So get help.
You don't know if you don't ask. So thank you so much to our panelists. A round of applause for Damilola Tiedi, to Tomilola Adejana, and of course, Oluwatosin Olaseyinde. Thank you so much.